What's going on?
What's up, bro?
Yeah. So I just want to make it clear that I don't believe in Bigfoot because belief implies a lack of evidence and faith to compensate for that lack of evidence. I'm just convinced based off of the evidence that there's enough to warrant the scientific inquiry into the subject. That there is most likely a bipedal primate living in North America. So yeah, I've got 7 casts with me. We can go over them and look at them. Definitely the casted footprints are the most convincing piece of evidence that there is. But if you look at the entire body of all the evidence, a lot of skeptics have a lot of explaining to do all the mountain piles of evidence coming in. And casted footprints in the anatomy and the consistencies between all of them going all the way back to the 1940s is definitely the biggest topic and the most convincing one. We have pretty much most evidence you could possibly think of just short of a type specimen, a body. And that's what proof is a body. But the supporting science starts with the discovery and the awareness of an anomaly, and the discovery process ends with the collection of a type specimen. That's when the discovery process ends. So we're really close to that actually, especially with genetics and what Darby Woodcut's doing at, I believe, North Carolina State University, somewhere in there. But yeah, also there's a lot of books on Sasquatch. I have a few with me. I'll talk about them in a minute, but yeah, and Sasquatches probably aren't the only bipedal hominin species that still lives on the planet today. There's probably around 3 to 4 other species other than humans. And this is a first generational copy of the casted footprint from Sumatra, Indonesia, of an orang-pendek.
Let's switch to my camera and put that on my camera.
Sweet. Yeah. So, lots of you have probably heard of the Homo floresiensis, the hobbit, a species thought to go extinct around 50 or 40,000 years ago. But the natives on all the islands of Sumatra still talk about short-statured bipedal primates living on the islands of Indonesia. And that cast is from Sumatra from 2013. It's a pretty well-known cast. There's a bunch more from Sumatra. But if you look at the skeletal reconstruction of the Homo floresiensis foot, the hallux, which is the toe, is non-divergent, which means it's just like ours. Our toes go in the same direction as the rest of our other toes, our big toe. But this, you can obviously see, you saw that the big toe is divergent, like a thumb almost. It has opposability in it. Well, so the overall description of the animal is very similar to that of Homo floresiensis, except the foot is a little bit different. So there's probably a few different branches of hominins like that have existed over.
How long ago did those exist?
They were thought to go extinct 40 to 50,000 years ago, and it keeps becoming more recent, especially with a bunch of different hominin species. Now, what is a hominin species? A hominid is a species on the line of human evolution since we diverged from chimpanzees. And yeah, so the most convincing piece of footage that we have of a Sasquatch is from 1967 in Bluff Creek, California by Roger Patterson and Bob Gimlin. And that piece of footage is so strong because it's biologically impossible for that to be a human in a fursuit for a number of reasons. And that is, a suit can extend your arm, but it can't change where on your arm or your elbow bends. A suit can extend your leg, but it can't change where your knee bends. It can't change where your joints meet. In combination, especially with the gait and the data set of 12 casted footprints going with the film, and the muscles flex and contract and make that sequence of muscle group movement that you can see. And
have you seen the like digitized like skeletal movement breakdown of like that footage? And I've seen two.
I've seen clips.
I've seen two different versions that like look like the same thing, and they're like one where they're like, "See, this means it's a creature," and I've seen others where they're like, "See, this means it's a dude in a suit."
Right.
And it's like the same animation. I was like, "What the fuck is up with that?"
Yeah.
But yeah, I've seen that. You actually know what you're talking about.
Yeah. Yeah. The anatomy is really convincing in that. So much so that there's no way it's a human.
Yeah, like where its legs bend, where its elbows bend.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then the muscles, and if Dr. Jeff Mulgin from Idaho State University has said multiple times that, he's an expert in foot morphology, and he has the largest collection of casted footprints of relict hominoids in the world. And he said repeatedly, if all he had were those line of tracks from that sandbank that he would be totally convinced based on that anatomy alone that Roger Patterson and Bob Gimlin's claims were authentic. And then that footage was shown at scientific symposiums and conferences, but the paradigm in anthropology in the 1960s was that of single species hypothesis, and that was developed from something called niche partitioning, which developed in microbiology, and then ecology borrowed that, and then the anthropologists were looking at human evolution and so, that fits, so they developed it in a single species hypothesis, was that only one hominid species can occupy the hominid niche at a time, because the other would drive the other to extinction, the hominid niche being bipedal, culture-bearing, and brainy. And but nowadays, there's been a paradigm shift from that over these past few decades to now we're discovering so many different species of human life that coexisted across the landscape at any given time. We know of now 60, 70 some hominid species, and we know the hominid family tree was bushy and branches going in all different directions. So why would we assume that all those branches terminated and were the sole survivor? All that is that persistence of that single species mentality that's still around today.
Have we found any evidence of different hominid species interacting with one another?
Absolutely, yeah. Obviously, the most known example is Homo sapiens and Homo neanderthals.
That I knew about, but
and also,
I knew about the mixing, but I was more culturally, if any of them lived next to each other, but didn't mix, but were aware of one another. Have we ever found evidence of that? Of there being Denisovans and Hobbit people, and them being aware that each other existed while not conflicting with one another. That's
the Hobbit people lived on island chains. Homo floresiensis.
I'm not saying them exactly.
Right, exactly.
Just saying different species, Yeah.
But just to be clear, Hobbit people means Homo floresiensis, nicknamed the Hobbit. And that cast I showed earlier.
Yeah, that's what that was.
Right.
And that's from Italy, an island off of Italy.
No, Indonesia.
Indonesia.
So that's in between India and
gotcha.
The Philippines and
this is the Neanderthals
Australia.
In Italy, right? Weren't they? They were in Europe.
Yeah, they were in Europe.
Yeah.
I don't know about Italy. But the study of hominins is known as paleoanthropology. There's a bunch of different subsets of anthropology. And then it's physical, and then within physical anthropology, which is also known as biological, where you look at human anatomy, how that's changed over time, as paleoanthropology. Yeah. But you've had an experience yourself in northern Minnesota?
It was in
Michigan.
Northern Michigan. It was summer before last summer.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, I went out there with my family to this spot. I can't name it because it's a secret club. You're literally not allowed to talk about it on social media and stuff. But if you look up Channing Tatum getting in trouble for talking about this club, you can figure out what place I'm talking about. Because he's been trying to be a fucking member of the club for 20 years. He's still not one. And it's because he posted a picture on Instagram. I'm not even kidding.
Really?
Yep.
Huh.
And there's a waterfall in there that they're do not post pictures of this. And he did.
Of the waterfall?
Yeah, it's that private.
Yeah.
It's a really beautiful waterfall. But yeah, they got pissed. And but I was in there, we were fishing, and we were in a rowboat, and we were in the middle of the lake, and off in the distance, on the shore of the lake, there's thick woods, there's mooses and elk and stuff, and bears, and I know what all of those animals sound like, and we were out fishing. And I think it was just me and my stepdad. It might have been me and my stepdad and my brother, but I'm pretty sure it was there was one or two times that just me and my stepdad went out fishing. We were there for a whole week. And we're in the boat. We get to the middle of the lake. The club's pretty much empty, and there's not pranksters at this club. It's a very private club, 40 miles of remote wilderness, 7 mountaintops, 10 lakes. Right off Lake Superior, and we get to the middle of the lake, and as we get to into the middle of the lake, we hear just like it had all of the different tones. Like it had bass, mid, treble, like all of those were strong. Yeah, what was that? Oh, that battery is low. But you know, it had all of the tonalities, you know, and but like loud as fuck. Like it sounded like it was like from a loudspeaker, you know, and it was like, and like you could hear like a shrill, almost screaming to it, but it was like it sounded fucking like a giant person. It didn't sound like a bear. It didn't sound like a moose. It didn't sound like an elk. It sounded like a fucking gorilla. Like it was, and it whatever it was loud enough. Like you could hear it echoing off of the mountains. Like we're like surrounded by mountains. Not big mountains like Michigan mountains, you know, but there's like one in every direction of us in this lake, and you could feel this sound like reverberate, dude. Yeah. Whatever it was.
Could you feel like in your chest, or was it more like just around?
It like I wouldn't say like because we were in the middle of the lake.
Yeah.
So I wouldn't say like it was like rumbling me.
Yeah.
But it was so much sound that you could feel it like fill the area, and it was a big fucking area, dude. Yeah, and like I'm convinced like that wasn't. I don't see.
And that property is owned by the club.
Oh yeah. I just don't. Like I said, I just don't see how it could possibly be a fucking bear or an elk. You know, it just doesn't make sense.
Yeah, that happens a lot. It's pretty rare that you get vocalizations like that. But there's been a lot of.
It was like it wanted us to know it was there.
Yeah, there's a lot of recorded vocalizations of what you're talking about.
I wanted to mess with this. But yeah, I've heard of other stories of vocalizations as well.
Right.
And, I've always been a skeptic. That experience, honestly, fuck. What's up, guys? That experience honestly blew my mind.
Uh-huh.
Like, it was like, whatever it was like, it wanted us to know we were in its lake. Like I said, it didn't fucking sound like an elk, dude. I know what an elk sounds like. It didn't sound like an elk, like, at all.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I've never heard of vocalization in person myself. I had gotten a rock thrown at me once, and I've got a few knocks. I was in I'm from Maryland, and I was camping in Western Maryland. I'm in Green Ridge State Forest near Rocky Gap Campground, and I actually interviewed a witness there on that had a sighting 10 years prior at like 1 a.m. on that same side of that mountain. And so that evening I went up there, like pitch black dark. I had a headlamp on because it was super rocky terrain, bushes literally everywhere. Like you hike up that mountain, it took me like 3 hours, still was never to the top. And if you keep going, you eventually go to Pennsylvania. I think I even did cross over into Pennsylvania. But like when I got a mile or two up the mountain, way past the campground, I hear down to my bottom right. See, this is a valley that has this lake in it, and there's Rocky Gap Campground, and there's a casino across the lake. So I was so high up I could see the lights of the casino way over the lake. And down to my right, I didn't do anything to elicit any percussive sounds like knocks. Like lots of primates knock on trees with wood or tear down trees to show dominance and shake trees and stuff like that. But we think that Sasquatches knock on trees or make a sound like that to communicate with each other on a low-key sort of way. Not so like they're screaming, but just like in a low-key way that's like, yeah, I'm over here, you're over there, we're good. We're just checking in with each other. Those are our interpretations. All we hear are our observations, or we hear sounds in the woods, and you can interpret what you think that is. But I heard boom, boom, like down to my bottom right. I get out my stuff. I'm trying to like knock back. I'm not getting anything. I keep walking. 2-3 minutes later, maybe 5 minutes later, I get another single one closer, same direction. A few more minutes, I'm hiking, and nothing had hit the ground that entire night, before or after, except this one time. It sounded like a rock, probably for me, way over to that wall, maybe twice as far on the ground. Something hit the ground. You sort of heard it like bounce a little bit, and I was just frozen for 1 or 2 minutes. I just couldn't believe what I heard. I think I heard some branches breaking in there maybe, and I just continued on like normal, and I didn't get anything else the rest of the time, the entire night. That was when, the beginning of the night. I was only out for like 3 or 4 hours. That was my most like closest experience I've had to something.
Mm-hmm.
And I've heard other knocks in Western Maryland, like the Catoctin Mountains or like Savage River State Forest, but nothing too serious. I haven't found any tracks in the field or anything.
Have you ever been out in the field and felt like something that like I felt like, I feel like there's a coyote near me.
Yeah, you feel like something's watching.
Something predatory, I felt like when cougars are around, like you could feel like something's lurking around, and
I've never felt that. No, a lot of people describe it. I might have felt it once or twice, really, but I never made much of it.
I had a time in Northern California out near Mount Shasta. I was on Black Butte Mountain, which is like right next to Shasta. And I was with my ex-girlfriend, and we were with our buddy. And, dude, I swear, man, it was like a Sasquatch or aliens or something, bro. Like, we went like into the national forest. And we're like going up this mountain road, and then we're like, oh, there's a turnoff into the woods. Let's just pull in here and hide our bus in here and park here for the night camp, And we're with our buddy, and we're all hanging out, being hippies, And like halfway through the night, like I think my buddy had to piss first, and he like goes to piss, and he's like, bro, something's out there. Like I don't know, man. I just feel fucking weird, and like then like eventually I had to pee, and then my girlfriend had to pee, and like all three of us, like grown ass adults, all three of us were just like, we felt like someone was watching us. Like
so one of y'all went out there to pee, came back, so you felt something.
And so like maybe we got spooked by him, but like all three of us just felt like there's fucking aliens out there or some shit. Like it felt like something intelligent and not chill was like watching us, like that same feeling you get when a fucking bobcat or a puma or some shit is near you, and you could just feel that like something's fucking looking at you, and yeah, dude, fucking it ended. So what was really fucking weird about this whole thing, right, is we end up camping for the night. We all are fucking sketched out about going outside. And they're like, what the fuck? There's fucking aliens outside. And we end up going to bed. And we wake up in the morning and the sun is up and we can see. Like it was like pitch dark. We're like in the woods, And we wake up and the spot where we were parked, we were like 10 feet from a fucking stone circle. Like 20 foot wide. Like either... I would assume humans put it there, but
probably
we didn't notice it when we pulled in, and it was right in front of our bus. Like I'm surprised our headlights weren't like directly on it.
Yeah.
But we didn't notice it, and we wake up and we're like, "What the fuck is this?" Like.
So you didn't notice it the day before, but
yeah, we pulled in at night.
Yeah.
We pulled in at night, and then we're like, we're just gonna hang out for a couple hours and go to bed, And then like I said, we fucking got so sketched out we didn't even want to be outside of the bus at all. And then in the morning we get out and there's this like 20-foot wide stone circle like right outside our bus.
Interesting.
And we're like, somebody doing rituals here?
Yeah, almost like a TP circle.
Kind of, yeah. or a giant pentagram circle, or who
like
knows
on the plains of the Dakotas, you can still see 100-year-old circles of these rocks.
I wonder if that is what it was.
Because you have the leather coming down, and then you have to weigh it down with something.
Yeah, it was like a perfect circle, man, and it was like 20 feet wide, made out of river stones. Like rocks like this big.
Yeah.
And yeah, we were all just creeped the fuck out by it. I don't know if Sasquatch was watching us. I don't know if fucking aliens were watching us, but it felt like someone was watching us.
Yeah, it's been long since hypothesized that feeling is infrasound. Something that you can't really hear, but it puts a feeling on you. Yeah. I know lots of predators do that to stun their prey before they pounce, just to give them that 1 or 2 seconds of extra time to get at their prey. Like tigers will project infrasound, stun their prey for half a second or a second, gives it just a good amount of time to get on that. And also there's pheromones too.
I was just gonna say pheromones. You know about cats and the pheromones they put off that terrifies mice?
Nope.
This shit's interesting. We had a mouse infestation. I was like, maybe if we get a pet ferret, it'll kill all the mice, right? And so that led me to look up, like, is this even a good idea? And everyone's like, do not do it, do not do it. There's a pheromone that mice produce that attracts more mice, right? Ferrets produce the exact same pheromone to lure them in. So if you get a ferret, it'll actually make your mouse problem worse, right? Even if the ferret's killing the mice, right? Because it'll just like keep attracting more mice because it's like turbo mouse pheromone, right? And so cats produce an opposite pheromone that is so terrifying to a mouse that if they come across like cat urine, a mouse will be so petrified by it, they'll literally like become paralyzed and fall asleep. Like it like knocks them out.
Oh yeah, chicken. You put a chicken in the dirt and draw a line in front of it.
Yeah, like that. It like fucking just like fucks up their brain and like knocks them out. And then when they wake up, they'll like scuttle away and they'll never go back to that place ever again. Like ever again. Like they like it's like on a DNA level. They know to fear cats. You know. And the reason I was mentioning that is I was going to ask, have you heard the stories of Bigfoots where people talk about how like they were like consumed with fear? You heard these stories?
Yeah. People were like stunned, frozen, they just can't move, things like that. About 1/10 of all Sasquatch sightings are associated with a stench, a smell that people really haven't smelled before. It's almost like a skunk, but you can tell it's not a skunk. It's one person described it to me as like natural gas or like an animal, rotting animal. Garbage, stuff like that. I've never smelled it myself. But lots of times it's in a localized cloud. So whenever it's released, I mean, all primates do this, but when it's released, it's almost like a cloud. Like you can walk into it, you can walk out of it. And gorillas emit pheromones from their armpits, and we do too, or we're just nose blind too. Whenever we experience really extreme emotions like we're agitated or we're angry or scared or something, we emit that stuff. But people describe, with respect to Sasquatch sightings, you walk into this cloud, you can walk out of it, you can walk out to the other side, you come back into it. It's like really localized, which is interesting. Yup.
Yeah, I've heard multiple stories, and I feel like most of them are fantastical bullshit stories. Like, you know what Coast to Coast is?
Yeah.
Art Bell? None of that? So there's this show on AM radio for like decades called Coast to Coast AM, and then I think after that became Midnight in the Desert with Art Bell. But the host was Art Bell, who's this guy who's a skeptic, and it's a great show. It's like we're like so much UFO culture and cryptid culture and all of this shit like really like got its start, you know. And fucking Art Bell has had a lot of people on that talk about their Bigfoot encounters and all this shit, and a lot of them, they feel like it's people who are on there because they just want to be known for telling a story, you know. And so a lot of them are bullshit, and you can kind of tell when it's just fantastical bullshit, you know. But there's been a few that I've heard that I'm like, this dude does not seem like he's lying, you know. And I've heard ones where people say like they were in the woods and they felt like someone was watching them or something, and like they became like paralyzed with fear. They're like, I couldn't move, like literally paralyzed, couldn't speak, couldn't move. They're like, I felt like I was being like psychically attacked, you know. And I wonder if it's like a similar species to us that can produce a pheromone that affects us because we're so similar. You know, and like you said, like they walked into like a localized cloud of whatever that pheromone is, and it freaked them the fuck out. You know, I wonder. Yep.
Yeah. Well, I definitely think that eyewitness testimony is the lowest form of scientific evidence. My conclusion that they're most likely real. I mean, on a personal level, I know that they're real. It's a reality for me, but sort of like my scientific, you know, idea and my scientific statement is that I'm just convinced there's adequate evidence to support that scientific inquiry. into the possible existence of an uncatalogued species of bipedal relic hominoids living here and around the world. But on a personal level, I know they're real, but I just that conclusion isn't based off eyewitness testimony pretty much at all. That's a big contributing factor in terms of the entire idea. But when it comes to the footprints and the anatomy and the footprints and morphology in the hair,
He's looking right at me.
But yeah, hair samples is a pretty good topic because there's a gold standard for Sasquatch hair out there that a guy named Dr. John Fehrenbach came up in a paper or a book or something like that, and that has to do with the physical morphology of the hair underneath a microscope. And so the hair is usually really long. It's definitely primate hair, very similar to human hair, except it lacks a terminal medulla or a fragmented terminal medulla, which is in the center of the hair shaft where you get most of the genetic material from, or that's the easiest place that you can get it. But we have a very pronounced terminal medulla, but they usually don't have one, or it's very fragmented and the ends of the hair are blunt and they've never been cut. So it's not a human hair.
Mm-hmm.
But when you test the genetics of it, it usually comes back as human or unidentified primate or unidentified primate. Most of the time human, and that's a good thing, because if chimpanzees and gorillas have a 1 to 2% DNA difference from us,
mm-hmm.
then Sasquatches might be so closely related to us. It might be 1/10 of 1% or 1/50th of 1% DNA difference from us, which means when we're testing the genetics of it, you have to look at enough genetic markers to differentiate between the two species. It's almost like an advanced counter. You have to open up enough doors to tell the difference between a Sasquatch and a person. And yeah, it's pretty difficult to do that. It's pretty expensive. You'd have to test like the entirety of the mitochondrial genome and like 2 or 3 dozen nuclear genes.
Yeah, I heard David Paulides saying something that like just to test one strand of hair is like $200,000 or some shit.
I don't agree with that anymore, because I've talked to so many geneticists recently, and I've listened to a lot of Dr. Jeff Meldrum speak on a bunch of podcasts and conferences and stuff, and I have his book, but he and a lot of other people say it's so expensive to test these hair samples in the way that they should be tested to differentiate between the two species. But all the geneticists I've talked to say, no, it's not that expensive. Maybe $100 per sample or something like that. But they might be referring to an entire genome project, which there's been one before, the Oxford University Sasquatch Genome Project, which was a complete disservice to the subject. It was baloney, basically. But there's a new one now with Darby Orcutt, and that's a lot more promising. But genetics used to be a lot more expensive 10, 15 years ago. It's a lot cheaper now. But still, if you want to do an entire project that involves a lot of manpower, a lot of samples from a lot of different places, and a lot of comparing and contrasting, then yeah, maybe it's pretty expensive. But if you're just testing 1 or 2 samples, I don't think it's that expensive anymore. And it's a matter of finding the right genetic lab that's willing to do that work on a big project like that, because where do the labs get their money from? Private funders and then universities. And if they're involved in such an tough and challenging and long duration study like this, then they might not be taken as seriously anymore. They might not get that funding. So it's definitely hard to find a good place.
Do you think if they found an actual, like, this for sure is a Sasquatch DNA sample, right? And like,
that's impossible, because there has to be a type specimen to go along with the DNA sample.
Mm-hmm.
You can't say, just based off of a hair sample, the genetics, it's definitely a hominin, it's so close to us, it was collected recently. That would warrant a lot of scientists to get interested in the subject. It would create a lot of interest, a lot of publicity.